There are places on this earth where no light touches, where the weight of the ocean crushes not just bones but minds. And down there, beneath 7 miles of salt and silence, we dared to dig. We were the first to reach that deep, but we were never meant to open what we found. This is the story of Deep Station Omega, and the last mission it ever conducted. Part 1, The Descent. Chapter 1, The Descent. The hum of the submersible was constant, a low vibration that seemed to permeate every fiber of my being as it sank deeper into the depths of the Mariana Trench. Outside, the ocean stretched out in every direction, an endless black void, a realm that had not seen light for millions of years. Inside, I sat alone in the cramped cockpit, staring at the small screen that flickered faintly with the data collected from our descent. My fingers hovered over the controls, each motion precise, automatic. It had been 6 months since I joined the team aboard the research station, located in the abyssal zone of the trench. We were part of a multinational initiative, an effort to probe the deepest reaches of the ocean and uncover its long-buried secrets. Our mission was clear: map the trench, take samples, and analyze the geological structures that were thought to be the most ancient on Earth. But nothing prepared me for what we were about to discover. I glanced at the other members of the crew, each of them busy with their tasks. Dr. Harris, our lead geologist, was hunched over the data logs, muttering about seismic activity. Dr. Mendez, the biologist, was monitoring the deep-sea life forms we occasionally captured on the submersible's cameras. The radio crackled to life. "Captain, we're almost there." Mendez's voice sounded over the comms, her tone unusually tight. "Understood," I replied, adjusting the angle of the submersible. "Prepare for full depth. We're going into the unknown." The descent continued, and with it, a creeping sense of unease gnawed at the edges of my mind. For weeks I had felt it, an oppressive weight in the air, a sense of being watched by something that was not human, something ancient, something vast. The ocean, with its secrets, had a way of making you feel small, insignificant. But what we had found, what we were about to uncover, it felt like something more. "We've reached the coordinates," Dr. Harris said suddenly, his voice cutting through the growing tension in the submersible. The submersible's lights flickered as we hovered over the spot where the anomaly had been detected. The data readings were off the charts, a strange pattern in the electromagnetic field. It was unlike anything we had encountered before, too symmetrical, too perfect. I looked down at the screen in front of me, the coordinates blinking back at me, an eerie confirmation of what we had found. The sonar had revealed something buried deep beneath the seabed. A structure, artificial in design, its edges sharp and geometric, like a forgotten monument. The size was unimaginable, larger than anything we had ever seen in these depths. "Are we sure it's not an underwater formation?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper, the words not sounding real even as they left my mouth. "Could be," Harris replied, his eyes fixed on the sonar. "But look at the patterns. The angles are too precise. This is no natural formation. We're dealing with something man-made, or something that was built by something else." A wave of unease washed over me. The trench was known for its strange geology, but nothing like this. "Should we investigate further?" Mendez asked, her voice quiet but tinged with a hint of fear. She had always been the most sensitive to the atmosphere down here, and I knew this was unsettling her too. I hesitated. Part of me wanted to turn back, to abandon the whole idea and return to the safety of the surface. But curiosity, that ever-present pull, overruled my hesitation. "Yes," I said, my voice firm. "We'll investigate, set up the equipment. Let's see what we're dealing with." I adjusted the submersible's position, carefully guiding it over the surface of the structure, feeling a strange coldness radiating from it despite the depth. The lights on the submersible illuminated the edges of the anomaly, angular, metallic, alien. And then there it was, a door. It wasn't large, not by the standards of the structure itself, but its shape was unmistakable. A perfectly rectangular opening, with a smooth surface that seemed to absorb the light around it. It had no handle, no visible seams. It was as if it had been placed there, deliberately, to remain undisturbed for an eternity. Is that a door? I murmured, disbelief creeping into my voice. We need to get closer, Harris said, his voice tense. I hesitated, but then the pull of discovery overcame my reluctance. I carefully maneuvered the submersible toward the door. The closer we got, the more I felt the oppressive weight of something watching us. Something ancient, something not of this world. As the submersible's cameras zoomed in, capturing the details of the door, I noticed something that sent a chill down my spine. There was a symbol etched into its surface, a series of lines and curves, something that looked like an ancient language, but one I had never seen before. Do you see that? Mendez asked, her voice shaky. I see it, I replied, a sinking feeling in my chest. But what does it mean? No one had an answer. Not yet. The door was locked, sealed tight, but its presence, its mere existence, felt like an invitation to something that should not be touched. But there we were, in the abyss, staring at it. And in that moment, I knew we were no longer just explorers, we were trespassers. And whatever lay behind that door, we had no idea how it would change us. The silence in the submersible was thick, almost suffocating. The only sound was the hum of the engines, the occasional creak of the structure beneath us, and our breathing too loud in the small, confined space. We all stared at the door, transfixed, as though it were a living thing, beckoning us toward it, pulling at something deep inside us. The door was like a void in itself, unanswered, unexplained, unnatural. I could see Harris leaning forward, his face lit by the dim glow of the submersible's controls, his eyes narrow with concentration. There's no way this is natural. I mean, look at the way it's built. The symmetry, it's deliberate. The weight of his words hung in the air like a thick fog. The more I looked at the door, the more I started to feel that sense of wrongness settle deep in my chest. It was as if the ocean itself had changed around us. The water outside felt denser, colder, pressing in against the hull of the submersible, as though the very ocean were warning us to turn back. But it was too late for that. We had come this far. Whatever was behind that door, whatever secrets it held, we needed to understand it. We had to know. I'm going to try a closer inspection, I said, my voice sounding almost mechanical to my own ears. Harris, Mendez, stay on your stations. I'll get the cameras in place. Harris nodded curtly, his eyes never leaving the door. Mendez didn't respond. She was staring at something just beyond the door, her face pale, a strange look in her eyes, a look I couldn't place, a mixture of fear and fascination. It sent another ripple of unease through me. I guided the submersible closer, the camera array extending from the front. The closer we got, the more intense the pull felt, like a gravitational force that tugged at my thoughts. My hands, despite their familiarity with the controls, trembled slightly as I adjusted the angle of the submersible. The symbol on the door, the one I had thought was just an ancient design, began to glow faintly. It wasn't much, just a dull, phosphorescent shimmer, but it was enough to make my heart rate quicken. I zoomed in on the symbol with the camera, capturing every intricate detail. It looked like an alien script, but it wasn't just the language that was strange. It was the way the lines seemed to shift, to twist, as if they were alive. I've got something on the readings, Harris said suddenly, his voice rising with a note of panic. The electromagnetic field, it's fluctuating. It's spiking in irregular patterns. It's almost like what? I cut him off, my own anxiety rising. Like it's reacting to us, like it's aware of us. I felt a chill crawl up my spine. His words felt absurd, yet in the pit of my stomach, I knew he was right. Whatever this was, it was not just some artifact from the past. It was active, and it knew we were here. Let's focus, I said, though my own voice shook. We need to get more data. Can you pull up the sonar readings? Dr. Harris quickly manipulated the controls, his face scrunching in concentration. There's something else, something moving beneath the structure. It's large. It doesn't make sense. It's not in the database. Something large. Mendez asked, her voice barely above a whisper. What does that mean? I don't know, Harris said. But we're not the only things down here. The submersible's lights flickered for a moment, casting long, eerie shadows across the door. The image on the screen wavered, as though something was distorting the feed. I blinked, and when my eyes refocused, the symbol on the door, it had changed. The lines were no longer just twisting. They were moving, shifting in real time, like they were written in liquid. I couldn't look away, even as the creeping sense of dread deepened. I could feel the weight of something ancient pressing against my mind, like a whisper from the void. Mendez gasped. Did you see that? The symbol. It's not the same. It's different. I opened my mouth to respond, but the words caught in my throat. The door itself seemed to thrum now, vibrating with a low hum that resonated through the submersible. I could feel it in my bones, a vibration that went deeper than any sound I had ever heard. It was as though the entire structure was alive. Something's wrong, I muttered almost to myself. Harris didn't answer. Instead, he was staring at the sonar screen, his face ashen. It's not just a door, he said quietly, his voice trembling. It's a gateway. A cold sweat broke out across my forehead. A gateway? To what? Before I could ask, the submersible systems abruptly shut down. The lights blinked once, twice, and then plunged us into complete darkness. Shit, I swore, slamming my hands against the console. What the hell is going on? The backup systems kicked in, bathing the small cabin in an eerie red glow. I quickly checked the monitors. Everything was offline. No sonar, no cameras. The communication systems were down. The only thing still functioning was the low hum of the emergency power, barely audible over the pounding of my heart. We need to get out of here, Mendez said, her voice tight with fear. Now. No, I replied, my voice more forceful than I intended. We can't leave. Not now. Not until we understand what this is. You're out of your mind, Mendez almost shouted. We're not equipped for this. There's something down there, something wrong. We need to go back to the surface now. The submersible groaned, a deep, resonating sound that felt like the whole ocean was pressing in on us. I could feel the pressure building both outside and inside the cockpit. I gripped the controls, trying to steady my breath. We can't. Not yet. But deep down, I knew. It wasn't just about curiosity anymore. It wasn't just about discovery. There was something calling to me, something pulling me toward the door, toward the unknown. Whatever lay beyond, whatever ancient power it held, it had already begun to work its influence on us. The door was waiting, and we were too far gone to turn back now. The submersible groaned again, a low, agonized sound that seemed to echo through the depths of the ocean, reverberating off the metal walls. The emergency red lights cast long, jagged shadows across the control panels, their faint glow almost more unnerving than the complete darkness we had been plunged into moments before. I tried to force my fingers to steady themselves on the console, but the trembling only grew worse. The pressure of the ocean was real, pressing in from all sides, but it wasn't just the physical pressure anymore. It was as if the very fabric of reality itself had begun to bend under the weight of something ancient, something malevolent. Why isn't the power coming back on? Mendez asked, her voice breaking through the tense silence. She was clutching the seat next to her, eyes wide and filled with panic. Her earlier calm had dissolved into something raw, something primal. I don't know, I replied, glancing frantically at the dead screens. It's the whole system. All of it's gone. We need to restart the core manually. What if it's too late? Harris whispered, his voice shaking. The geologist had always been the most level-headed, but now he sounded afraid. We're not leaving this station until we figure out what's happening, I said, my voice hard, almost defiant. I had always been the one to push forward, the one to keep the team focused, but right now, I could feel something stirring inside me. Something just as frightened as they were, but equally determined to face what lay ahead. The hum of the submersible was almost soothing now, a constant background noise that, in the chaos of the moment, felt like the only thing tethering us to reality. I forced myself to focus on the task ahead. We needed power. We needed communication. We needed to know what was happening outside the submersible, because the longer we sat in the suppressive silence, the worse things would get. "I'm going to open the maintenance panel," I said, getting up from my seat. My legs felt shaky as I moved toward the hatch, but I forced myself to ignore it. The submersible was designed to withstand the crushing pressures of the Mariana Trench, and yet it felt as though it might collapse at any moment. "I'll stay at the controls," Harris said, his voice weak. Mendez nodded, but she didn't look at me. Her eyes were fixed on the door. I hesitated. The door, that cursed thing. We hadn't spoken of it since the power failure, but it loomed large in my mind. Whatever was behind it, whatever ancient force we had uncovered, it had only just begun to make its presence known. I tore my gaze away and began to open the maintenance hatch. As I did, a sharp noise cut through the air, like nails on a chalkboard, high-pitched and piercing. The kind of sound that didn't belong. It didn't make sense. I spun around, heart racing. Mendez was staring at the door, her hands shaking at her sides. "What is it?" I asked, my voice a whisper, afraid that even speaking too loudly might provoke something I didn't understand. She opened her mouth, but no sound came out. Another sound, a whisper, barely audible at first, but unmistakable. "Did you hear that?" Mendez said, her voice trembling. Harris's eyes were wide. He glanced at the door and then back at me, but he didn't say anything. He didn't need to. There was something behind the door. A voice, presence, a whispering, ancient sound that made my skin crawl. The low, guttural hum was like a chant, deep and resonant, and it was growing louder. I could feel it vibrating through the submersible, through the water, through the very air we breathed. My head throbbed. My ears rang with the sound. The whispers, they weren't just words. They were thoughts. They were memories, buried deep beneath the surface, rising up to meet us. I felt dizzy, nauseous. "Mendez," I said hoarsely, "get away from the door. Now." But she didn't move. She was frozen, her face pale and blank, her eyes staring at the door like she was hypnotized. "Harris, get her away from there," I shouted, my voice cracking with panic. I rushed over to Mendez, trying to pull her away from the door, but she resisted. Her body was stiff, unmoving. The whispers grew louder, their rhythm increasing in pace, becoming faster, more insistent. The vibrations rattled my teeth. The ocean outside seemed to groan in response, a sound that came from the depths, a sound that belonged to something older than the earth itself. Then, as I pulled on Mendez's arm, something shifted. A sudden crash, like a door slamming open, though we had heard no physical movement. The submersible jolted violently, and I nearly lost my grip on Mendez. I heard Harris yell something, but I couldn't make out the words. The sound was deafening now, a cacophony of noise and terror, a rift in reality itself. And then the submersible lurched again, harder this time. The emergency lights flickered and went out completely. In the absolute darkness that followed, the door opened. A cold wind, the kind that shouldn't exist underwater, rushed through the submersible. It was chilling, otherworldly, like the breath of something not quite alive. The lights blinked back on, but the image on the screen before us was impossible to comprehend. The door, once perfectly smooth and immobile, was now ajar. A darkness beyond it, not just blackness, but something shifting, a void, a gap in reality itself. The whispers turned to screams. My head was pounding, my vision blurring. I staggered back, pulling Mendez with me, but she was still frozen, staring at the doorway. "Close it," Harris shouted, his voice frantic. But it was too late. Something moved beyond the door, something huge, something that was neither light nor shadow, but a distortion of both, twisting, stretching, bending. And then it came. I could feel the pressure rising in my chest, like the air in the submersible was being sucked away. My mind was in chaos, torn between the primal instinct to flee and the sick curiosity that held me in place. The door was open now, but it wasn't the door I remembered. It was no longer a simple metal barrier, no longer something that could be explained by science or reason. It had become a rift, a tear in the very fabric of reality, and through it, I could see something that defied comprehension. The darkness that spilled through the doorway wasn't just the absence of light. It was something living, something moving and pulsing, like the heartbeat of some ancient, unseen creature. It shifted in ways that didn't make sense. A writhing mass of pure entropy, an endless expanse of black that wasn't just dark. It was wrong. The whispers had stopped. In their place, there was a deep, resonating hum, like the sound of 1,000 voices speaking in unison. But each voice was too faint to understand. It wasn't language. It was something deeper, something primal, something that existed before words, before concepts of thought. I felt a sudden wave of vertigo. My stomach churned as if the ocean itself was trying to consume us whole. And then I saw it. A figure, or rather, the distortion of a figure standing just beyond the threshold. It wasn't humanoid, not in any sense that I could understand. It was shapeless, yet somehow there. A massive, shifting outline that seemed to bend and stretch in ways that no living thing could. It was like a living shadow, a creature made from the absence of light itself. Yet it had substance, something that clung to the edges of the world. Its eyes, or what I assumed were its eyes, were pinpricks of pure white light, floating in the blackness. They pierced through the dark like twin stars, and as they fixed on me, I felt a terrible, suffocating weight pressing on my chest. A sense of insignificance so profound that it made me want to collapse, to lose all sense of self. The figure moved slowly at first, then with an unnatural speed. It crossed the threshold of the door and into the submersible with ease. It didn't walk, but slithered, like smoke gathering form. I heard Mendez scream, but the sound was muffled, as if it were coming from the bottom of a deep well. She tried to pull away, but her body was frozen in place. It was as if the very air around us had thickened, becoming viscous, suffocating. I reached for the controls, my hands shaking violently, but nothing responded. The submersible was no longer mine to command. The systems were dead. The ocean outside had become a vast, unknowable void, pressing in from all sides. We're not going to make it," Mendez whispered, her voice a broken rasp. She was shaking, her eyes wide with terror. "It's too late." Harris hadn't moved. His eyes were wide, fixed on the creature, but his mouth was moving in silent words, like he was trying to speak but couldn't. His face was pale, almost translucent in the dim red light of the emergency systems. It was clear that whatever we had uncovered had completely shattered him. The figure in front of us was changing again. It wasn't just one form, but many, layers upon layers of itself, constantly shifting, merging and splitting, like an abstract painting made flesh. A mass of disjointed limbs, uncountable eyes, a mouth without a face, all rippling in and out of existence, as though it had no true shape, no true form at all. I wanted to scream, to run, but my body betrayed me. I could feel it, an overwhelming compulsion to stay, to stare at this thing, to understand it, even though every fiber of my being screamed for escape. My mind began to unravel, each thought more fragmented than the last. The whispers from the abyss had returned, louder this time, but they weren't words anymore. They were images, flashes of impossible things, of alien worlds beyond comprehension, of futures that had not yet come to pass. I saw something in the creature's shifting form, something that I couldn't name but felt deep in my bones. It was watching me, it was studying me, and I understood, in the deepest part of my soul, that it wasn't interested in us as mere specimens. We were insignificant. It was interested in something far darker, something more profound. We had awoken it, and it was hungry. "Mendez," I croaked, my voice barely audible. We need to close the door. We need to stop it." But she was gone. Her face was slack, her eyes vacant, staring into nothing. She wasn't there anymore. Harris was still staring at the creature, his hands slowly rising in front of him, trembling. He opened his mouth, but the words that came out weren't his. They weren't even words, they were guttural, inhuman sounds, like the echoes of a language older than the human race. "No!" I screamed, stumbling back. "Stop it!" But it was too late. The creature's form solidified, twisting and expanding in ways that didn't belong in the physical world. And then, with a sudden, sickening jerk, its shape collapsed into a singularity. A dense point of nothingness that sucked in everything around it, compressing the air, the water, the space itself. Couldn't breathe. The pressure was unbearable. Every atom of my being felt as though it was being stretched and torn. The reality around us seemed to fold, to warp, like the very laws of nature were bending to the will of this entity. I could hear Harris's screams, but they were swallowed up by the crushing silence. A silence that was far worse than any noise. And then, nothing. The submersible was still. The ocean outside had gone completely still, as if the entire world had been frozen in time. The lights flickered one last time before they died, leaving us in total darkness. I could feel the oppressive weight of the water above us, pressing down on the fragile vessel. I could hear the faintest rustle, like something brushing against the hull, but I couldn't move. I was trapped in the quiet, suffocating nothingness. Time had stopped, and I understood, in the final moments before my mind fractured completely, that we were no longer part of the world we once knew. We had crossed over, and there would be no return. I don't know how much time passed after the creature, the thing beyond the door, collapsed the submersible into a singularity. Could have been moments, could have been years. Time, for all intents and purposes, had stopped, and with it, any semblance of order. The water, the walls, the submersible itself. They all ceased to make sense. I remember floating in the dark. My body felt weightless, but my mind was heavy, thick with an oppressive silence. I tried to focus, tried to hold on to something familiar, but the echoes of the entity, the whispers that had once been so distant, were now inside my skull. I could hear them constantly, threading through every fragment of my thoughts. And with them came the visions, flashes of alien worlds, of impossible geometries, of places where time and space were irrelevant. I tried to scream, but no sound came out. It was as if the very concept of sound had been erased from existence. And then, just as suddenly as it had all begun, the darkness seemed to lift. The pressure was gone. I was no longer drowning in the crushing weight of the ocean, nor was I confined to the submersible. I was suspended in something else. The whispers were gone, replaced by an unbearable stillness. But I could still feel it, feel the presence. It was watching me, always watching. The next thing I remember, I was back in the submersible, or what was left of it. The controls were completely fried. The emergency lights flickered faintly, casting an eerie, ghostly glow across the interior. Mendez was still frozen in her seat, her eyes wide and unblinking, her face pale and expressionless. Harris was no longer there. It didn't take long for me to realize that something was wrong. Worse than wrong. I was alone. The submersible groaned as it shifted, and I heard the faintest sound, the sound of something crawling through the walls. The darkness outside seemed deeper, as if the abyss had taken root inside the vessel itself. I reached for the communication system, desperate to reach the surface, to contact anyone, but the screens were dead. The signal was gone. I don't know how long I've been here. All I know is that the whispers never stop. They're in my mind. They're in my dreams. And I fear I've already become one of them.